Mrs. Collins, this is Sandra from Sunrise Realty. I have wonderful news about your house sale. I was in my herb garden when the call came. House sale? I'd never listed my house. The closing is next Tuesday, she continued cheerfully. Your son-in-law Derek arranged everything. He said you were excited about moving to a senior community. My blood went cold. Derek, my daughter's husband, selling my house behind my back. I'm sorry, I said, careful with every syllable. There must be a mistake. I haven't listed my house. There was a pause. Oh, then it's already in the system under Derek Collins, she said. He told us you'd be ready for closing. I didn't speak right away. Not because I didn't understand, because I understood too quickly. Derek had been calling me confused for months. Now I knew why. I see, I said, keeping my voice level. Thank you for calling, because I knew something Derek didn't. The moment I sounded emotional, he'd use it as proof. I hung up and stood in the silence of a house I'd lived in for 42 years, the same walls that held my daughter's childhood laughter, the same roof I'd paid off with decades of work. He didn't think I was too old to live alone. He thought I was too old to fight back. And I knew I wasn't the first person this had been done to. I stopped reacting. I started documenting. If someone made this decision for you without asking, you'd feel it in your chest too. My name is Ruth. I'm 73 years old. Retired high school principal. Raised my daughter Lisa alone after my husband David died of cancer. Lisa is 35, works as a nurse practitioner. Good heart. Always worried about me living alone. She married Derek 3 years ago. He's 38. Supposedly works in insurance. After I retired, Derek started making comments. Little things at first. Ruth's getting scattered, isn't she? When I'd misplace my reading glasses. Maybe we should check on her more often. When I'd forget to call Lisa back immediately. He disguised control as concern. And slowly, Lisa started repeating his question. Then came the day everything changed. 2 months ago, Derek showed up with a briefcase and that smile. Lisa was working late, so it was just us. Ruth, he said, settling into David's old chair like he belonged there. We need to talk about your future. Derek opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Inside were glossy brochures and legal documents that made my blood run cold. Lisa and I are worried about you living here alone, he began. This house is too big, too much maintenance for someone your age, someone my age, like 73 was some kind of expiration date. There's a wonderful senior community called Golden Valley Manor, he continued, spreading brochures across my coffee table. Meals provided, housekeeping, medical care on site, and Ruth, let's be honest, your memory isn't what it used to be. I asked him to explain what he had in mind. I've taken the liberty of having some paperwork prepared. He pulled out a stack of legal documents, power of attorney forms so Lisa and I can help manage your affairs, and a listing agreement for the house. Power of attorney, the kind of paperwork that turns your life into someone else's property. Based on what? I asked quietly. Ruth, you're forgetting things. Everyone can see it. Last week you forgot Lisa's birthday. A lie. I'd called Lisa at exactly 7 a.m. on her birthday, same as every year. The week before that, you got lost driving to the grocery store you've been shopping at for 20 years. Another lie. I'd taken a different route to avoid construction. Ruth, honey, he said, with that patronizing tone people use on children. At your age, these little slips become big problem. I'm trying to help you, he said, before you make things worse. But Derek delivered these accusations with such conviction that I almost questioned myself. I've spent 30 years dealing with manipulative teenagers. I know when someone is running a con, and Derek was running a masterclass, but I also knew that responding with anger would only reinforce his narrative about my mental state. So I did what any good principal does when facing a problem student. I gathered evidence. You know, Derek, I said slowly, pretending to study the document. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time to think about these things. But this is such a big decision. Can I have a few days to consider it? Relief flickered across his face. Of course, Ruth. Take all the time you need. But don't wait too long. Golden Valley has a waiting list. After he left, I sat in David's chair and planned my next move. You know that feeling when someone's helping you in a way that makes you smaller instead of safer? That's when I stopped being polite and started being smart. The next morning, I did what Derek didn't expect from a confused old woman. I fought back. First, I called my longtime friend Margaret, who's a retired attorney. I told her everything. Ruth, Margaret said, her voice tight with anger. I've seen this pattern before, just with older victims. The fact that he's spreading rumors about your mental capacity while positioning himself for power of attorney. This is criminal. Margaret helped me understand my option. We had to be careful, methodical. Any wrong move would give Derek ammunition for his confused old woman narrative. We need evidence, Margaret explained. Documentation of his lies, proof of your competence, and most importantly, we need to catch him in the act. The next week, I underwent a comprehensive neurological evaluation at Margaret's suggestion. The results were crystal clear. My cognitive function was completely normal for my age. No signs of dementia or impairment. He didn't know my evaluation already proved him wrong. We documented everything. Then Margaret helped me set a simple trap. We let Derek think everything was going his way. A few days later, I called Derek and told him I'd been thinking about what he said. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was getting too old to manage things on my own. That's wonderful, Ruth, he said, excitement barely concealed in his voice. I'm so proud of you for making this decision. Lisa is going to be thrilled. We arranged to meet the following Tuesday. Derek would bring the papers, I'd sign them, and we'd get everything sorted out. What Derek didn't know was that Margaret would be recording every word from the next room. The trap was set. Derek just had to walk into it. And knowing Derek, that wouldn't be a problem. Tuesday morning arrived with Derek, his briefcase, and a notary. She introduced herself as Patricia, but what stuck with me wasn't her name. It was the way she kept glancing at the clock like she wanted to be anywhere else. I invited them into the dining room and offered coffee, playing the part Derek expected. Polite, a little unsure, grateful for help. Before we start, Derek said quickly, Lisa can't be here today. Emergency at the clinic, but she's completely supportive. Another lie. I'd spoken to Lisa that morning. She was at home, happy, normal, unaware that her husband was trying to sell my life out from under her. Derek spread the documents across my table like he was laying out a magic trick. Power of attorney, listing agreement, and then a purchase. He'd already found a buyer. The price made my stomach tighten. $150,000 below market. Cash offer, Derek said. Quick closing. In this market, the discount is worth it. Patricia shifted in her chair. Just a small movement, but I saw it. Patricia cleared her throat, then said nothing. She avoided looking at me, and I remember thinking, even she can feel the rush. Even she can hear the wrongness. This all seems very fast, I said softly. Derek smiled with that practiced patience that isn't patience at all. It's pressure. Ruth, he said, you're not as sharp as you used to be. The longer we wait, the harder these decisions become. Trust me, this is best for everyone. I picked up the pen, not to sign, to watch him. His eyes gleamed, just for a moment, like a man who can already taste victory. A key turning in the front door. Lisa's voice, light at first, until she saw the table. Mom? Derek, what's going on? Derek went still. Patricia went still. And I didn't move at all. Because I knew that sound. The sound of a liar realizing he's about to be heard by the one person he can't control. Some people would have shouted. Others would have walked away. I stayed quiet. Lisa walked into my dining room and stopped dead when she saw the papers spread across the table. What is this? She asked, her nurse's instincts immediately sensing something wrong. Derek's face went pale, then flushed. Honey, I thought you had to work today. My shift got canceled, Lisa said, moving closer to examine the document. Derek, what are these papers? Just some estate planning, Derek stammered. Your mom asked me to help organize her affairs. Lisa picked up the listing agreement, her eyes widening as she read. Mom, you're selling the house? Since when? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. This was the moment of truth. Lisa, I said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Have you and Derek been discussing my mental capacity? Lisa's expression shifted to confusion. What do you mean? Derek tells me you're both worried that my mind is slipping, that I can't take care of myself anymore. Lisa turned to Derek, then back to me. Mom, I've never said anything like that. You seem completely normal to me. Derek jumped in quickly. Lisa, you've mentioned being worried about your mom living alone. Being worried and thinking she's incompetent are two different things, Lisa snapped. Then to me. Mom, when did you decide to sell the house? This was my moment. The choice between protecting Derek's lies or exposing the truth. Lisa, I said, standing up straighter. I never decided to sell anything. Derek has been planning this without my knowledge or consent. The room went still. That's ridiculous, Derek said, but his voice was shaking now. Ruth, you signed the papers. You agreed to everything. Actually, I said, walking to the kitchen where Margaret had been waiting. I wasn't alone, and I have everything recorded. Margaret walked into the dining room with a small recording device in her hand. Derek's face crumpled as he realized his perfect con had just fallen apart. "Hello, Derek," Margaret said with the calm authority of someone who'd spent 40 years in courtroom. "I'm Ruth's attorney, and what you've just attempted is called elder financial abuse." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. This is insane. Ruth's not competent to— Actually, I interrupted, walking to my desk. "Let me show you just how competent I am." I pulled out the folder I'd been preparing for weeks. Medical evaluations, financial records, and something Derek had never bothered to check: my professional background. "Derek," I said, setting the papers on the table, "you made one crucial mistake in your research. You assumed that because I'm 73, I'm helpless." I opened the first document, my neurological evaluation. "This shows my cognitive function is perfect, no impairment whatsoever." Derek was sweating now. "Ruth, please, I'm not finished," I said firmly. "You see, you also didn't bother to check what I did for a living. 30 years as an educator, the last 15 as a high school principal. Do you know what principals do all day, Derek?" He shook his head mutely. "We deal with liars, manipulators, people who think they're smarter than everyone else." I pulled out another document. "We also document everything." I showed him the recordings Margaret had made, the notes I'd kept of every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd attempted. "You said I forgot Lisa's birthday," I continued. "Here's the phone record showing I called her at 7 a.m., same as every year. You said I got lost driving to the grocery store. Here's my credit card receipt from that exact store, time-stamped for the day you claim I was confused." Lisa was staring at Derek like she'd never seen him before. "You lied about all of this." Derek tried one last desperate play. "Lisa, your mother is having some kind of paranoid episode. This is exactly what I was worried about." That's when I played my final card. "Margaret," I said, "would you please explain to Derek what happens to people who commit elder financial abuse?" Derek's face went white as Margaret smiled coldly. "Felony charges, prison time, and full restitution to victims. Some lies catch up with you faster than others. This was definitely one of those times." Derek collapsed into a chair as the full weight of his situation hit him. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said desperately. "I was trying to help." "By forging my consent to sell my house?" I asked. "By lying to my daughter about my mental capacity? By positioning yourself to steal everything I've worked for?" Lisa was standing frozen by the table, still holding the fraudulent document. "Derek, how could you do this? To my mother? To our family?" "I was protecting you both," Derek shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. "Ruth's old, Lisa. She can't manage this place forever. I was just getting ahead of the problem by stealing her house," Margaret said flatly. "And from what I've heard, this isn't your first financial difficulty, is it, Derek?" Derek's silence told us everything. Gambling debts, bad investments. Something had made him desperate enough to target his own family. "Our entire marriage. Have you been planning this from the beginning?" Lisa asked quietly. I watched my daughter's face as she processed the betrayal. Derek hadn't just tried to rob me, he'd been using her love and trust as weapons against her own mother. "Lisa," I said gently, "I need you to know that none of this is your fault. You're a loving daughter who wanted to take care of her mother. Derek exploited that." Derek made one last attempt to salvage the situation. "Lisa, please. Your mother is turning you against me. Can't you see what she's doing?" Lisa looked at Derek for a long moment, then at me, then back at the papers that would have stolen my home. "You're done here," she said quietly. "Leave." Derek grabbed his briefcase and fled, leaving behind the wreckage of his con and his marriage. Margaret gathered up the evidence. "Ruth, do you want to press charges?" I looked at my daughter, who was crying quietly at my kitchen table. "What do you think, Lisa?" "Yes," she whispered. "He tried to steal your life, Mom. People like him, they'll do it to someone else if we don't stop them. Justice would be served, but more importantly, my family would be protected." The weeks that followed brought a parade of investigators, prosecutors, and very uncomfortable questions for Derek. It turned out Margaret was right about the buyer. Derek had partnered with a real estate investor who specialized in acquiring undervalued properties from elderly sellers. They'd done this before, and our evidence helped prosecutors build cases against both men. Lisa filed for divorce immediately. She'd kept her maiden name when they married, which made the paperwork simpler. "Mom," she said one afternoon as we sat in my garden, "I'm so sorry. I should have seen what he was doing." "Sweetheart," I replied. Con artists are experts at manipulation. Derek spent 3 years studying our family, learning how to use your love for me against both of us. But I should have trusted you more, should have questioned why he was always the one bringing up concerns about your memory. I reached over and took her hand. You did exactly what a good daughter should do. You listened when someone expressed concern about your mother's well-being. Derek exploited that goodness. The trial was swift. Derek pled guilty to attempted elder financial abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. He got 2 years in prison and full restitution, but the legal consequences were just the beginning. Derek lost his insurance license. His employer fired him immediately. People who once defended him went quiet. The ones who mattered stood beside Lisa. The day the verdict came down, Lisa and I celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant. You know what the prosecutor told me? Lisa said over dessert. She said most elder abuse cases never get reported because victims are too embarrassed, or families don't believe them. That's exactly what Derek was counting on, I replied. He thought I'd be too ashamed to fight back. He definitely underestimated Principal Colin, Lisa said with a smile that reminded me of her father. No, I corrected. He underestimated Ruth Collin, woman who raised a daughter by herself, and wasn't about to let some small-time criminal steal her life's work. 6 months later, I'm still living in my house on Maple Street. My mind is sharp, my garden is stubbornly alive, and my mornings belong to me again. Lisa visits twice a week now, not because she's worried about me, but because she actually wants to be here. We cook, we talk, we let the quiet feel safe again. I framed the papers Derek wanted me to sign, not as a trophy, as a reminder, because here's what people like Derek count on. They count on seniors being too polite to question, too tired to push back, too embarrassed to make noise. So if this story made your chest tighten even a little, if it made you think of your mother, your aunt, your neighbor, don't ignore that feeling. Sometimes concern is just a costume. Sometimes help is a leash. And you know that feeling when someone's helping you in a way that makes you smaller instead of safer? Trust that instinct. If someone rushes papers in front of you, that's not help. That's theft wearing a smile. And wisdom, it turns out, is the best defense against people who mistake kindness for vulnerability. Derek thought I was too old to fight back. He thought I was old. I was prepared. Some lessons only come with age, and some stories only get told once we stop staying quiet.